is Oromo Voice Radio English Program. Oromo Voice Radio is broadcasting to Oromia at 16-meter band or 17,850 kilohertz or on oromovoice.org website. OVR broadcasts Oromia Insight program every Monday for 15 minutes at 7:15 p.m. Oromia local time. Welcome to Oromia Insight program.
Oromia is a country in East Africa well known as the Horn of Africa. It's 600,000 square kilometers, making it larger than France, Italy, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Oromia is populated by over 40 million people. It's the origin of human race and the Gada system. Oromia is the birthplace of coffee and home to world-class athletes. Also is a nation with multi-faith society, Christianity, Islam, and Wakefana. Oromia is the third largest single nation in Africa and the single largest nation in East Africa. It has been occupied by Ethiopia for over 130 years and is struggling for self-determination. Oromia has an unaccounted number of Oromo refugees living in other countries.
Welcome to Oromia Insight. My name is Aliye Geleto. I have a special guest today, Yasmin Hassan. Yasmin Hassan is a third culture adult-born Oromo parent. As someone who was born cynic and raised as a skeptic, Yasmin is driven by a need to engage in critical thought and discourse. Throughout her work history, she has engaged in numerous settings that have allowed her to interact with different communities on a variety of platforms to get an informed and a comprehensive picture of national and international communities, experience and issues. Interested in experience of visible minority in diasporic setting, Yasmin's academic career began with Master by Research degree in Political Science and International Study from Monash University, where she first became seriously interested in and increasingly delusioned by the narrative about visible minority in academia. She has worked mainly on the experience of young Muslims in the West. However, you choose to define it in a post-September 11 security climate. Today we discuss about education, gender, religion and belonging, living in diaspora, politics and the security with Yasmin. Welcome, Yasmin.
Thanks so much, Aliye.
So let's start with education. Where did you go to school? Do you go overseas or here, or can you go through from primary, secondary, university, and whatever, whether you actually involved in research? Can you take us through?
Oh, I'll take you on the journey. It's a pretty much it's a short and perhaps boring journey. I've been both fortunate and unfortunate enough to go to the same Prep 2 Year 12 school here in Melbourne, an Islamic school. And I stumbled into Monash to do my undergraduate degree, and whilst I was there, I was extremely lucky enough to do a semester abroad in Toronto at York University. And perhaps it is there more than anywhere else where I reaffirmed my passion for education and teaching and for women in politics. And that pushed me into continuing to pursue further qualifications and postgraduate degrees within this field, specifically focusing on holding on to the degree, holding on to controlling the narrative for minorities. Yeah, and right now I suppose I'm between life choices, but it's always something that my father has instilled in all of us, the pursuit for higher education. And, both of them, my mother and father combined, have only 1 week of formal education. And I think it is both an honor and a privilege for all of us, my siblings included, to pursue anything that brings both them and us pleasure.
I see a lot of Oromo parents value education. Even some parents, they haven't been to even school for a day, but they actually value education very much. Is that the case in your family as well?
Extremely so. I mean, I just mentioned that Mum and Dad have 1 week of formal education between the two of them. And I remember when our littlest, she's 13 at the moment, when it was her second week of grade prep, I said, look, take a moment to appreciate it that you have completed more schooling than Mum and Dad. And obviously it hasn't sunk in for her then and probably still hasn't now. But it is, if there's one thing that I really respect all parents for within our community here in Australia, is that they value education to the point of knowing that even when a child thinks they know best, and often more cases than not the child probably does, that the parents are, they've got the wisdom of hindsight as well as foresight to know that in a country, in a service economy like Australia and in the international service economy, education is perhaps the greatest tool that we could use to sell ourselves and our services.
So how do you see your education yourself? What is the purpose? What do you get out of it?
I mean, for me, the two questions that have always pushed me or inspired me to do anything is why and how. Why does something happen, and how does it happen? And I mean, I suppose I'm precocious and curious by nature, and education allows me to explore multiple facets. And I just want to make clear that education doesn't have to be the formal within a classroom setting type. It could be practical-based or industry-based learning. And I think one thing that parents need to know is that not one model of learning or one style of education will suit all children. So it has to be a conversation that parents have with their young child, and know that if your child is inclined to to want to be an engineer, you don't push him or her to become a doctor. And if your child is an artist, and that is a beautiful, what's the word I'm looking for, beautiful ambition, you can't push him or her to pursue something else that they're not passionate about. Ultimately, everyone becomes miserable in the long end. And I think finding a style that suits every person is going to be a difficult journey, and you probably won't get it right by the time the child is close to attending university. But it's a conversation that it has to be an honest conversation between the child and the parent, and a recognition that not everyone is going to be a doctor, and that's okay.
I'm just curious about education and gender, especially for a woman. How education actually affect gender?
Okay. Well, this is an extremely loaded question, and I think it's it's a possible PhD area of research for any listener to pursue. There are multiple applications where education can affect gender and vice versa. I mean, culturally, this is probably extremely unfair, but most cultures are more inclined to push their daughters into a certain profession, say perhaps teaching, because it's seen as a more feminine career option, or let's say nursing, or something that allows a woman to be a woman, whatever that means. And men are generally more inclined, or culturally pressured to become engineers and doctors and lawyers, and even perhaps accountants. And it is often rare. I mean, when I told my parents that I wanted to do politics at university, it wasn't something that they could comprehend, given that the nature of politics and the Oromo community's relationship with politics and politicians both abroad and back at home. It's really difficult for people to get past gendered options and gendered career paths. And the other thing that the older I get, that I'm beginning to realize is when within our community here in Melbourne, the women are more likely to complete high school and to university and complete university compared to our brothers. And that's a conversation the community needs to have and to explore why is that the case, and what does it mean for the long-term prospects for the girls. And no one, would want to... it's probably an uncomfortable place to go, but it might have applications for future career options for the women, and branching out outside of the community, because they might feel either alienated or others might feel intimidated by them. I'm not implying anything here, just an observation. And feel free to jump in, Aliye, and make this a conversation rather than an interview. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, these are just my initial surface-based observations. I'm not sure what other experiences you've had though. Education,
gender, religion, and the culture, put them together, and how actually one actually affect the other one.
Oh, that's real complex, and yeah, and it probably goes against my academic training to put all four into one statement. But in the interest of this interview, okay, let's say I'll use me as an example. Obviously, I'm a visibly Muslim woman. I'm also visibly black. I have certain practices that are unique to both being Muslim, being black, and being Oromo. And so I remember the first few classes as an undergrad that I walked into at Monash, and, you know, it was 2007, about that time. So it's just after, you know, the 7/7 bombings in 2005, and, you know, September 11 was particularly, we were still in that, and we still are in that climate. And so whenever a topic would come about terrorism, and I was the only African woman probably even within the Caulfield at the time, people would always look to me for a response. And at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, look, I'm here. We all went to different schools, but we all ended up at the same place. So we're pretty much the same. That's my rationale. And if you're looking for answers, so too am I. I'm not the vessel of answers. And often at the time, I would, you know, kept to myself, and it was an unfamiliar environment for me, you know, being in a largely non-Muslim space, coming from a largely Muslim space at high school. So not only was I adjusting to that, and I was also, you know, in a cycle of re-education post-high school, you know, transitioning into university. And there were multiple examples where, you know, being woman, especially when things about, you know, hijab would come about, or, you know, women's rights as it relates to, you know, being an African woman, when we talked about, you know, FGM, or when we would speak about, you know, religion. It was, I think those examples would be that point when all the three or all the four of the elements you pointed out have come together.
Yeah, in Australia, especially if you are black and you are Muslim,
yeah,
you really have to struggle. That's what I actually get sometimes from African women with hijab. They always have to explain themselves, and people actually look at them like they are a threat or a stranger or an outsider. Or do you actually see that? Why that is actually happening?
Do I see why it's happening, or do I see is it happening?
Is it happening, or why it's happening if it is?
I mean, we could hypothesize until the cows come home as to why it's happening. But and I do see it happening in the works that I do with different communities through volunteering and through work itself. We see that both, you know, the African, you know, brothers who are visibly Muslim, you know, carry a particular burden, but it is largely that the women, I think, I forgot who said it, that, you know, this is largely inarticulate of me, but, so we're going to talk about the hypothesization here for a minute, Aliye. So, you know, Africans, irrespective of religion, we carry a massive historical baggage and legacy and a lot of propaganda, you know, through the slave trade and even before the transatlantic slave trade. And then on top of that, we have religion, where religion is racialized. So when the word Islam comes into the forefront of a person, it's originally, you know, an Arab man, an Arab woman in a burqa or in a niqab or something, and the man is wearing the jalabiya and he's got a beard up to his knees. But then when you see that with a black person, it triggers something in certain people's minds. And you know, the irony of it is, I often get asked if I'm a Muslim, even though I'm wearing hijab. And because for some people, only Arabs can be Muslims. So we have to transcend the baggage that, you know, Islam is a universal religion, and only 14% of Muslims worldwide are Arabs, and everyone else is everything else. So there are a lot of historical reasons why people get...
We'll stop this interview for this week. We will continue next week with Yasmin Hassan. Our topic will be education, gender, religion, identity, belonging, living in diaspora, politics and the security. Somehow we covered education, gender and the religion. Next week we will talk about identity, belonging, living in diaspora and politics and the security.